Robert Grandjambe from Fort Chipewyan originally, Wood Buffalo National Park, trapper. I reside in Northwest Territories, Fort Smith, and so I do a collaboration of a lot of different exercises on my own time and efforts to observe in the big picture of what actually is trickling down from industry, agriculture, overconsumption, human population, and put it into context and to allow myself as a provider to regulate my ability to provide for my own people, for communities, for elders, and so on and so forth. So I guess I do travel quite a bit, and I do harvest a lot to feed the extended amount of people that I'm able to do. And it's all with the collaboration of information that I've been passed on from my ancestors, my grandparents, my parents, but also more recently to observe the outstanding impacts that we're dealing with. So again, whatever's in nature will always balance itself out. So there's always a high and a low in everything, and balancing itself out is maintaining those balances and kind of not seeing the highs, not seeing the lows, but taking when time is good to take, right? So that's one of an Aboriginal teaching that I can pass on. So we'll go with an introduction to myself. So I passionately demonstrate my traditional heritage through exercise my cultural teachings on the land. I have maintained my traditional connection from when I left home at the age of 15, and now at the age of 34, living in two worlds in critical modern success. But I believe that being dedicated to your passion is key in life. In my case, living humble, productive life on the land is paramount. My top priority continues to be as it was when I was a child, following the natural lessons and rhythms of seasons along with animals, witnessing many changes in my environment over its course. So, fundamentally, we all have to sustain ourselves and maintain, right? From, I guess, my point of view is how can we do it best, and how can we further this to carry on for our children to have what we shared as our children as well, right? And what is that approach? The methods are the roads and paths we're given now, will not continue success down the road. I can tell you that from a land user, right? So how do we reevaluate this, and how do we implement better strategies, better ideas to, again, collaborate non-Indigenous and Indigenous teachings where, we've always existed, and we have to always exist continuously. So that's what we're here today for. So yeah, feel free to stop me anytime if you have any questions, because there's a lot of information I'd like to compress into this short amount of time. So yeah, what do you guys think about the trailer? So yeah, you can view it online. It's a CBC production. An interesting thing about that is it's not an Aboriginal production. So talking about non-Aboriginals taking Aboriginal stories in context to establish themselves. When that was produced and it was premiered in August of 2018, it was Fox Chaser Winter on the Trampoline. So, so people were Googling Winter on the Trampoline, and it didn't exist. So Winter on the Trampoline was my title. Funny story. And curious enough, I didn't see a lot of the material that was taken. So I spent 4 weeks with this film crew out in my trapline. And it was interesting to share the dynamics of how I see things and how I can portray that image without using my voice or my language, is by knowledge and teachings from just my gestures, right? So one of the captions there was the little fox hunting, right? He's diving into the snow. So that's a unique fox, by the way. That's not a common fox. So he's a dominant silver cross fox. So that's something that we don't see commonly, right? So I came upon this fox after they filmed it, and I harvested it. So it was part of the collection because I like to show children. I do a lot of seminars and presentations. So that was a unique fox. So I did harvest it, not knowing it was part of the cast. So I feel very bad about that. But it's interesting, yeah. So we'll carry on with the biography. So okay, we're going to go through the seasons, I guess. We'll start in the PowerPoint. Sorry. So the 4 seasons. So the spring season. So my spring season revolves around the migratory bird harvest. My summer season, it is timed when I do my fishing, gathering of medicines and berries. My fall season is dedicated to the collection of our meats, along with wild berries that are that are ripened last in the season. Returning to the migratory birds from the Arctic, along with the collection of medicines before winter approaches. So what I'm getting to is I'm actually combining a lot of information into the approach. When I walk into the trap line, that'll be tomorrow, and when I get to the trap line, I'll already have analyzed and assessed my winter season, whether even being there or not. I've been absent for three months now, but I've been actively harvesting. So from the spring, summer, fall, I can already predict what's going to happen in this winter season. It's not going to be a regulation telling me that I can trap X number of lynx or X number of wolves, because that's bogus to teachings that I've been taught. And how do we correlate that same image of conservation in those methods and those strategies, right? So walk into the trap line, I already have an idea what I'm going to go after for species particularly, right? So understanding that paying attention and being on the land really represents a lot more than just a regulation at the end of the day, and confining them with those compound or those confines, right? So we're going to go with so migratory birds, winter season. Okay, so my winter seasons are dedicated to the trap line. From all contributing factors that play a huge role in our ecosystems, from spring to fall indicates weather, water, air, land, migrations, forest fires, pollution, etc. Over the course of the year, walking into the trapline season, I believe it is my responsibility to further investigate what affects our ecosystem that have been exposed to. As a trapper, I have to identify which species thrive or die over the course of a season through exercising humane methods of harvesting wild fur. The data collecting over the course of the season is especially helpful to direct my course of attention and where I need to apply in as a fur harvester. So any questions to that? Around the table? So, you know, in the sense of what I'm trying to exercise and do is as sustainably, as best management practices, as it prolongs, you know, the environment to maintain and sustain animals. At the end of the day, we're still after the same obligations, and we can't separate or segregate non-Indigenous and Indigenous in two different components to have the same purpose, because we've always maintained as Aboriginal people, and we still want to maintain, but now it's challenging as there's layers of different borders and boundaries, provinces and territories that are very conflicting. So again, you know, re-evaluating this to understand the big and broad picture of why we're all here, right? So that's the introduction to it. So my biography. At the age of 6, I was introduced to hunting, fishing, and trapping or harvesting wild furs from the land. Through the mentorship of my father, mother, grandfather, uncles, and other elders, relatives, my father especially was instrumental in teaching me the fundamentals of life through work ethic, respect of myself, and respect of the land, sharing cultural foods with the community, gaining an appreciation of knowledge of the land, and sharing my skills in both aspects of life. It's a big role. So my mother was extremely supportive in nurturing my ability to become independent at a very young age, which enhanced my ability to fend for myself out in the land. Through her teachings, I was able to build my ability to adapt and adopt new methods of survival, both in the bush and the modern world. My grandfather showed me traditional ways of living off the land. His influential teachings impacted my view on life and the role I played as a provider. He helped me to learn how to balance my lifestyle in today's modern society. So just going over those 3 points and those three mentors I had in my life were exceptionally much more of a compound effect, where I'm walking a path now and recreating a path that was already once was created, but now from the past generational confluence of how we, you know, society has continued on, we have to re-identify that. You know, we've already established something that was sustainable, was prolonged. We've identified that. Now we're going back to it and reinventing the wheel. So we have to understand that this process is going to take time. It's going to take relationships. It's going to take cost of ourselves dedicated and devoted to the outcome at the end of the day, right? So that's where I want to go with that. So yeah, that's this. So at the age of 15, I pursued my high school education. So I grew up in a small community in Fort Chipewyan, so it's an isolated community, still inaccessible by road to this day. So I left at the age of 15 to pursue my education elsewhere because that was what was pushed on me as my parents, that education was important. Still maintaining my identity as an Indigenous person, so I still had connection to trapping, hunting, whenever I could. Interesting story was when I was living at a relative's house in Fort Smith, there was a kind of a block section with a bunch of trees. And I just noticed the amount of rabbits were going inside there. So as a trapper, I had to go and see how many rabbits I can harvest. So 32 was a number. So that was great because there's still rabbits at the end of the season, but I was already pulled my snares. Education was done. I moved on. So 2 years after, there was 6 times as many rabbits in that little block section, and there's 4 times as many foxes in town eating those rabbits. So you put a pressure onto a species, it'll come back and it'll thrive if the environment is healthy and if there's good habitat, right? So we have to understand those those compounding effects. Sure, that one season fed a lot of elders, but 3-4 years down the road, they can come back quite strong, right? So playing that role is very important. So that's just at 15. Yes. So pursued my education, got my grade 12 in Fort Smith in 2003. I didn't attend my ceremony, my graduation ceremony, so I was influenced by, again, furthering and bettering my lifestyle. So I had pursued carpentry, and I got into the national level of Skills Canada. Went to Waterloo and participated there, and I missed my graduating ceremonies for that reason. Just to have the experience, right? To leave the north and explore something new and something that could benefit me down the road. So that was a wonderful experience. I soon came back to the north, and I wanted to be a millwright. I didn't want to be a carpenter. So then I pursued I pursued millwrighting. I've been at the trade now for 15 years. So I'll go to fast forward. So yeah, I was passionate about all aspects of construction and the dream of pursuing a trade in carpenter or millwright. Then after high school, I decided to move to Fort McMurray to pursue my millwright trade. That now following spring, I've started with Syncrude Canada, a first-year millwright at 15 years ago, working as industrial mechanic for the past 10 years in a local union out of 1460 in Edmonton. Currently, I run my own mechanical company while maintaining and balancing work lifestyle. In my off season, still maintaining my harvesting and for my community and my elders as I'm able to continue to extend myself. So going by and say that, sure, it's great to jump in one side of the world where everybody's thriving, everybody's pushing you to become successful, but you have to understand to become successful, you have to understand where your roots are and implement it, right? So it was very struggling and challenging to leave my community, to walk away from the trap line, to maintain that, but I had to jump back and forth. I just, to my existence, that's what I did, and I still do. So I'm still in a very, very small fashion. I apply myself to the trades to understand what that industry has to offer us, but also I'm very connected in the 8 months that I am able to be on the land and continue that process and understand those changes, right? So you kind of see, some 2 different parallels, and combining your knowledge, which is important, that in this day and age is so much, more advanced than just having one direct vision and one direct teaching, right? So that's where I go with that. So at the age of 12, the National Film Board of Canada did a documentary about me. It's called The Little Trapper, and you can view it at your local library. The Royal Museum is on display as well for, the attributes I've contributed to that. In 19, what was it now? So when I was 18, I worked with CBC Film, The Nature of Things, and I did a documentary with them as well. I was actually the river guide, so kind of the opposite of being part of the film. I was more of the director of where to take them and where to show them, the contributing factors of how I seen it as an 8-year-old being on the land from a young boy to that era, right? And still combining that knowledge and walking away to 34. It's compounded now, so it's not going to get any better if we're going to continue this route in a small lifetime. So I was part of that, and at the age of 33, at the age of 33, I featured in 2 programs called Trapping Inca on Wild TV, 2 episodes highlighting again the my methods and strategies of harvesting wild furs on the trap line. So that's online as well. You can view that. At the age of 34, I was fortunate to be able to be able to be a part of a documentary called Fox Chaser, A Winter on the Trapline. It's a 45 documentary about my lifestyle, my life choices, commitments, dedications to continue the way of life, and despite all odds and challenges in our modern age. So that's what the trailer was about. The understanding is it was not a role or responsibility that was gifted to me or granted me. It was a dedication that I was avid to be a very knowledgeable person if I can be very diverse in different environments, right? So being out there and harvesting would basically, I would harvest a lot more than I can consume myself. So at a young age, I was able to give more food. And I've seen the connection between relations between my grandparents and my parents and myself to come at the same table and eat. And that was one of the correlations where I'm still in existence now. If I can harvest more food off the land and feed more people, we're all going to come together and more people are going to have the same unity, right? And the same common goals. So, or at least sit at the table and talk about, something that we're relatively in favor for. So that was the role I took on myself. And I say it's self-funded, and the more I'm able to make, the more I'm able to feed is how I can kind of translate that. So yeah. So we'll get into climate change. So climate change. So everybody's heard about climate change. It's thrown out there in social media, so thrown out there in media, and it's really alarming to a lot of Canadians of how we identify climate change and what strategies are taken, what councils, what committees are really structured by this climate change. In Indigenous culture, change has always happened in our lifetimes. We've always seen this as the adaptability of what we're faced with. If it's a winter season that came early, well, we just have to figure that out because that's what's going to come about. One analogy I like to always share with is, it kind of goes with the sustainability as well factor. So a beaver lodge, have you guys ever seen a beaver lodge? And he piles a bunch of willows in the fall time. Well, that beaver already knows what season he's going to predict or what's going to happen because he has to survive for the next year. So he'll only pile so much willows. Whenever he starts is whenever the snow's going to come, is whenever the winter's going to prolong or happen, and then he's going to be able to come out and rejuvenate, right? He doesn't take more than he has to sustain himself through a winter months, if it's 4 months or if it's 6 months. But that beaver already knows walking into that season that he already predicts winter's only be for 4 months, so I only have to need this amount of food, right? Not a whole bunch. So as consumers, we kind of, we've not necessarily taken that approach. We've kind of stockpiled more than we can actually utilize. So going with that analogy to, I guess, climate change and understanding that these variations are really rapidly changing now. And that's where, again, it conflicts with a beaver or a muskrat or a lynx or a moose or, a fox. Like he said, the fox that jumps into the snow. Well, if it rains in January, that little fox is, his snout gets squashed or smushed, right? And he has to adapt to different abilities to survive, right? So I see it on an everyday basis that, when I'm out in the trapline, there's every animal that's affected by something drastic as that. As myself as a humane harvester, I can maintain humaneness if the trap freezes open, if the snare lock doesn't go on time and it kills the animal, because now that's my responsibility as where do diligently, and that's not right and that's not correct, right? 50 years ago, my grandfather used to use steel traps that I can't use anymore, but still that's how we progress as a population. So if we didn't have the antes to bring up the concerns of humaneness and cruelty of animals, we'll never progress further. So trapping now has extendedly set a standard that is humane, it is effective, and it is sustainable. So going back into that little fox that has to scurry around and find other methods to get through the layer of crust to get at his mouse or get his food at the end of the day is quite severe. So the warm temperatures that go back and forth, mild and cold, that is very alarming to myself. And it's alarming to, again, the birds, the chickadees, the willows, the vegetation, the insects that I see that come out in different wrong times of the year. So being a land user, I'm saying, and I'm trying to explain that it's so important that more people are out there. We identify as Canadians that we need to be out there more actively rather than talking about it, because talk is really, not the end case, right? So as a fur harvester and a provider in different orientations, you're looking at it as a big, as a big puzzle. And every year we can add more information to it is just that much more, successful for everyone, right? So we'll go into, so that's a bit about climate change. So being a trapper, I'm always trying to maintain and understand the complexities of our ecosystem. In one breath it can thrive, and in the next breath it could die quite rapidly. However, in the end, somehow, without any human interruptions, it will always balance itself out. And again, time and time again, we've always manipulated something to kind of fix something, correct our mistakes, and something else trickles over here. And we never learned. We haven't learned where science is wonderful, it's useful, but we haven't learned that, the more we manipulate nature, it's always in a compound and come back in some drastic other way for other animals or other environments that are, very critical to our abilities and sustainabilities of our human existence, right? So, when are we going to start understanding that, let's not toy with nature, let nature kind of figure itself out. And the more we suppress it and we kind of try to manage it, it'll always, never work in our favor. So understanding like some of the reports where I come from is the Wood Buffalo National Park, and the wood bison are kind of it's alarming the numbers are so low. And being a harvester in that area, I see it directly as forest fires, as pollution, as their common practices and I guess migratory routes have altered and changed within my own time frame, which is catastrophic for down the road for my own children. But again, we can't solve the problems now because they're already too far gone where the bison numbers and population are continually going down. Same as the caribou, same as other things that are, I guess, correlating to the end result, right? So a statistics was, as Parks Canada and their management mandate was to protect wood bison. So in 1921 they established the Wood Buffalo National Park. 1927 around that area. 1926 they brought in a plains bison herd integrate into a wood bison. So now it's a hybrid species with tuberculosis and brucellosis into the herd. And so those are the two common factors where we as Indigenous people, that was a staple of our food that we had to maintain, but now we had to maintain with diseased animals to harvest. And so when you cut open an animal and you're looking through the organs, the glands of the animal, now we have to identify what's healthy and non-healthy because of, implications now, right? So again, we have to recognize what we've done in the past, and it's not necessarily correct for the better portion. And we can't throw a Band-Aid on it and say it's going to be okay for X number of years. We have to, retrain ourselves and stop thinking in that method that we can Band-Aid something and then down the road it's going to be okay. So, we talk about conservation very loosely in those terms, in those fashions. So as policymakers, as regulations, as, governments that, take the approach, take the initiative, but water it down, and by the time it trickles out, it's too late. And that's where I say we can't get and continue on this path, that it's going to be too late from here on in. And so when we take the initiative to, again, collaboratively bring everybody together that is, wants the right outcome for the existence of a particular species or for land management. And I think, collaborating for all of us being here today, I think we have some good insight and some reputable people that, initiated this to get the ball rolling, right? And that is my, that is my objective at the end of the day, to be a part of this continuation and my support. So we'll go on into my federal and provincial governing parks. Is that okay? So share a little story here, guys, with you. So I exercise my treaty right to hunt, trap, and fish within the boundaries of Wood Buffalo National Park. I hold a general hunting and trapping license to the group area 1204. As it parallels the Peace River and the Slave River Northwest Territories border, there are 21 group members holding valid trapping license in this area. The southern portion of the area is highly condensed with harvesting cabins and recreational cabins along the river system. At the northwest corner of the group area lays a beautiful pristine body of water called Pine Lake. Sections of that lake are open to recreational purposes, cottages, swim beaches, public picnic and camping areas. The opposite side of the lake are two reserves belong to two First Nation groups out of Fort Smith, Northwest Territories. east of the lake shores enters Group Trap Line 1204. I received a map from Parks Canada that clearly showed the boundaries of the trap line, so I cleared brush and access trail to establish a harvesting cabin. And I can talk about it where it's very to establish a harvesting cabin. So yeah, I found this section of land on the trap line I belong to. I'm recognized that I have Indigenous rights in this area, and I've recognized that there's boundaries where I have to stay within and confines, right? So no problem, I can do that. So it's very condensed on the southern shores and all along the eastern side of it, or eastern side of the trap line. In this one area where it's pristine, no one is trapped there. There's a, they have, 1 second here. So yeah, so I cleared a brush and access trail to establish a harvesting cabin due to the source of fresh water, easily accessible year-round, and in a forest fire control zone. Parks Canada applies enormous efforts to protect this beautiful oasis in the heart of the boreal forest. So you see the picture there and kind of see the land terrain. So the recreational uses are from the months of April 1st to October 31st to the public. My harvesting periods are strictly to the winter activities from November 10th to February 28th, to which wild fur is prime and best quality and different species for different windows as the season rolls along. In fall of 2015, Parks Canada burnt the contents of my equipment and my structural material. Parks Canada explanation under the National Parks Act, section 21.1 or 27.1, I was identified as a nuisance to Parks by the superintendent, which gave him authority to remove the structure of my personal belongings off-site. They had consulted with the 2 First Nations, explaining the situation, and I was trespassing on an active trap line that I was within 800 meters of the radius of the lake. Parks Canada claims my structure interrupted hiking paths and active beach. So where do we go from there now? Lost a page here. So, considered a commercial trapper, and according to Parks Canada has built several roadblocks and discouraged my having an operation trap line. I was under surveillance of my everyday activities on and off site. Still through this process, there was no charge laid. I have not breached a regulation or legislation. It's been 4 years now, and I'm taking Parks Canada to court on injustices I have incurred, trying to exercise my treaty rights to sustain off the land, like my ancestors have always done before European contact. The first court case is a judicial review of a cabin application that was filed and denied. The only harvesting cabin application that was submitted for Pine Lake area. The second court case is the restitution or compensation of materials, loss of trapping equipment, and still in Parks' possession. I wanted to share this story in my personal life because it definitely shows a direct mindset of the dominant society, and the behaviors stem from government agencies, departments, etc., that in order to build these bridges forward, we need to start off together on the same path, because it is not only a First Nations problem, it is a Canada problem. Thank you for your time and consideration. Yeah. And please travel home safe.